Hello, early birds, or those who are watching the replay. It's a few minutes before the hour, and so we're going to start in just a second. Well, more like a couple minutes. Okay, I have a couple of Facebook users. I apologize. All I see is Facebook user, and I don't have. Okay, so Sandra's one of them. Yay, lovely to see you, Sandy. And Claudia is there too. Excellent. And then we have Darlene, who's also under Facebook user. Tess is on board, eating her lunch, that shows determination. That really is a good sign of what you're willing to do and you've taken this before, Tessa, but you're still here and showing up, and that makes a difference. Ellen's here, excellent. And Randy's here. We got another Facebook user. Kate. And then Amy's here, still under Facebook user. So we have a lot of Facebook users today for me, but I'm the only one that can see that. So again, it's just an apology. Sandy says it's morning in Australia. Carol, I do see you. It is a lot of the other folks I don't see. So Tessa, sounds like a fascinating trip. Anytime you get to take the opportunity to watch theater, live theater, watch explanation of it, you'll learn body language, because that's what good actors and actresses, they understand that it is their body language on the stage that lets the viewer experience the story. And Sandy's at 5 a.m. Randy's at 4 p.m. Okay, so we have almost the world covered here. Robert says the sound is on. And Louise is on board. We have about another minute before we'll get started here. But I hope you enjoyed, even in a painful way, those who posted homework to really find out where you currently are with your usage of body language and where your default body language usage is. If you don't have a manuscript or work in progress, I hope you've taken advantage of looking at other people's posting. I caught up, I believe, with everybody up until an hour ago. So Mandy says reading the homework and the feedback has been amazing. And that's why I believe strongly in getting feedback, and I don't sugarcoat it. If it's not enough, I'm going to tell you. If it's too much of one body part, I'll tell you. All right. That's not to stop you in your writing. It is so that you know where you stand as of today or yesterday. And all that means is you have an idea what to do moving forward. So speaking of moving forward, we're going to go ahead and get started here. This day's lecture is going to be focused on avoiding cliches. So by doing yesterday's assignment exercise, you have a rough idea what are your default go-to places. And keep in mind, when someone posts 151 eyes or something, some of those are simply going to be, they looked, which means they saw, or the color of the eyes. So it can really make a difference um, in understanding. So there's going to be another exercise today, and it's going to build on what we did yesterday. So if you never got around to the exercise yesterday, yes, you can still post, but be aware as we move on this week, I'll have less and less time to go back to the first exercise and keep going in the future ones. So again, a little bit of understanding. To me, if you don't understand some of the science, the mechanics behind what body language communication is about, it can be you're guessing. The face has around 90 muscles in it, and about 30 of those are just for expressing emotion. Why? Because two cavemen come out of the cave, and one looks at the other, and they look at their face. And you need to quickly be able to read, is this friend or foe? Is this someone I should be wary of? Is this someone I should accept with open arms? So you look at the face first, then you look at what the body's doing. And if he's carrying a club, that's always a good sign too, but he may be carrying a club because he's out hunting. Now, a pioneer researcher in kinesthetic, I always get this one wrong, kinesthetics, I'll make the word up. It's that study of the body in motion. Now, sometimes there's motion that is simply the mechanics. You know, she reached her hand to pick up the book. That's just motion. It's not really communicating a lot. But if she thrust her hand and snatched that book, that's revealing emotion, which is nonverbal communication. But anyway, when you study the body in motion, that there are in the face alone, there's over 250,000 expressions. Now, what that means is you don't have to use every one of them. But what that means is if you are only using the face or lightly using the face and using a cliche on top of it, you are really cheating your readers and yourself from building readers because of what you're writing. Now, the average writer usually starts and stops by focusing on one of two things, the eyes or the lips. Now, when people say they counted out lips and mouth and other parts of that area, it's the same area of the body. So it can create a triangle on the face. If you look at a picture, it's eyes at the top, that's the base long part of the triangle, and then it goes down to the mouth, which is the short part of the triangle. And they forget the rest of the face. It's a blank canvas. And it's up to the reader to guess what's being expressed. Here's an example. She looked older than she was. That's straight telling, which means the reader isn't seeing what the point of view character sees, which creates the motivation for understanding why that point of view character decides something about that secondary character. There's absolutely no body language messaging, no nonverbal communication in that she looked older than she was. So let's go to a second draft. The child looked older than her age. He could see it from her eyes. Now the reader at least knows what the point of view character is specifically noticing, the eyes. But it's still what I call a summation statement. The point of view character is saying, looked at her mouth and she's older than I thought she was. That just tells you what I'm looking at and why I'm coming up with my assumption. So let's see how Meg Gardinier does it. Though her frame was a child's, her eyes were stained with age. Now, Meg is on the list of posted up in the files, about 6 or 7 pages with fiction of different genres, tried to break it down, but it lets you know some writers, and if their name alone is on that list with no specific book, it means anything they write, they use great body language. So here, did you get a stronger image of what the point of view character was seeing? Darlene says, reading this hurts. It's so beautiful. It's that emotion behind it. It pulls you deeper onto the page, and that's the goal. The reader sees that secondary character in a stronger way, and specifically what the point of view character is seeing via the eyes and also the body. Because it's not just saying her body, it is saying her frame. Though her frame was a child's. So this is what we're working toward in understanding body language. Change up non-existent or blah body language to create a specific image in order to create a stronger image for the reader. You don't put it on the page, they're not seeing it or experiencing it. In that 2 sentences, well, actually, I think it was just one of Meg Gardenia, you're 1 sentence, and you experienced what the point of view character is seeing. It pulls from the emotions. It pulls this, as you go forward, there's going to be this sense of, is this child damaged beyond redemption, or is this child a victim that needs something from the character? So let's look at a typical overused brow description. His brows arched. His brows raised. One brow raised in a question. Okay, so these are just telling statements. And Darlene says, I'd also say if the entire book was like that each time, it would be overwhelming. Absolutely. So it's like spice in when you're cooking. Yeah, don't dump in the whole container of spice. You use it when it matters, when you're being introduced to a new character, so you have an understanding of characterization that also shows you conflict, that reveals emotion. But you don't do it time after time after time, the same type of thing. So you are the one that gets to control what you put on the page, Darlene. So don't worry about that. So we have these kind of boring, cliched brows raising. So let's look at some authors, and they took the boring and cliched and made the imagery communicate more. This comes from Pat Conroy. A twitch in Chad's right eyebrow is the only outward sign of discomfort he reveals. Much better than just he raised a brow. This comes from Emily Richards. He lifted a bushy white brow in punctuation. Now, we all know that the brow being raised oftentimes can indicate a question or confusion. But Emily Richards, this is in a romance. Pat Conroy's was general fiction. So you have different authors taking the cliche and changing it up a bit. And here's another one, Nevada Barr. His thick, dark brows asked the question he seemed too polite to phrase. So automatically, as a reader, you're seeing what the point of view character is seeing that is giving her that information. You can still use brow communication. So that's when people said, I have too many eyes, I have too many shrugs, whatever. It's not about getting rid of them, but change up how it's described, or focus on the movement or the degree of change instead of simply the act of raising the brow. So how do we change up that ubiquitous shrug? Let's look at this, and then Claudia, I'll get back to your comment here. Instead of stopping with she shrugged or he shrugged, I expand to include more information. She shrugged. Now, if the author had stopped there, you wouldn't see much. Her shoulders were starting to ratchet up around her ears, which means that this point of view character is noticing that the other person not only shrugged, but they're staying up in tension or in, think of a turtle. What does this turtle do? It can't shrug because it doesn't have shoulders, but it pulls its head down to protect it. And that's what Tana French, who is writing in a suspense thriller genre, does here. Now, any of her books are outstanding because she, in her previous occupation, was in the theater. She was an actress. So she learned how to use body language to get across to the audience the emotions that we're playing, but she also translated that to her writing. Claudia says, so it's the what part and then the how. Not necessarily, Claudia, because you're saying, okay, so it's the eyes and then how the eyes are described. You go a lot of times from the emotion that you want to show. Then you look at, if you want to show that emotion with a body thing that you're overusing, you then change to look at how would I show that emotion with hands or arms or the torso. So you're not just looking at this body part and then how do you make that body part show what you want? You go from what the intention of using that communication, the emotion, the characterization, the conflict, then think about the different areas of the body and then go to how do I want to show that to make it clear. Ziona saying, I'm already using lessons. Her eyes were sharp, like she never missed anything. Absolutely. You have a stronger image of her. Secondary characters looking at the first character, but they're seeing more. They're seeing something about that characterization that is revealed in her eyes. Sarah says, my favorite eyebrow line I've written was, his eyebrows fought over the bridge of his nose. Yes, that is excellent because it's a different, fresh take on it. Add additional body language to change things up so that the focus is not only on the shrug, but the combination message that's communicated. Here, Lani Diane Rich that writes both women's fiction and also romance. I shrugged and kicked my feet under the breakfast bar like a teenager reluctant to admit she still likes teddy bears. Do you get a visual of that? So this kicking of the feet, instead of just saying, I shrugged and kicked my feet, or I kicked my feet, or I shrugged, she took it a few more words to make it clear that this was almost a pout that was happening here. Focus in on the intention when you're writing body language of using or not using a shrug or anything else to create a clear message. So the next nonverbal communication includes an emotional explanation as to what a shrug means, but also reveals a lot of characterization and backstory. Point of view character is looking at her mentor, Jay. Jay long ago taught me not to shrug. He said that it was an indelicate movement that indicated helplessness. So instead, I lifted my free hand palm up in supplication for his understanding. Yes, it's a little bit more than just he shrugged, but it lets the reader be right there in the story, seeing what that point of view character is seeing. When using an intentional cliche, such as a shrug, because let's face it, we shrug in our world, or we smile, or we grin, or we frown. Understand that the reader will not see anything specific, but more a shorthand message of surprise, hesitation, questioning, or confusion. Cliches become shorthand, but that's why they become almost invisible. To write more than a cliche, consider adding additional body language to make the message clearer, a fresh description of how the body part looks to a specific point of view character. Sometimes the way people frown, just like Sarah used in her example, you're getting more. Sarah said his eyebrows fought over the bridge of his nose. We're seeing more because of a fresh way of saying that. Anne says her arms half raised, her hands open like the wings of a hesitant gull. Much fresher than just she threw her hands open. Also consider more words so the reader sees the cliche in a new way. Now, I'm not recognizing or recommending a paragraph, 2 paragraphs to get one point across. If it's a very important part of the book, yes, you can use that. But if it's just to show something, you can usually show it in a sentence or two. Or a different body area to communicate what the cliche is meant to communicate. So this is where, if you found that your default is eyes, mouth, and in the mouth, it's the grin and the smile and the step back and think, what am I trying to indicate by that cliche? By that, she smiled. Then ask yourself, where else in the body I can show this? Now, we're going to be looking at the homework, the exercise for today. And again, up to an hour ago, I had caught up with everything that I could find in the hashtag EX1. So if I have not responded, double check and make sure you are actually using hashtag EX1, because some used hashtag HW1, which is homework 1. Some used hashtag space, EX space. Those I can't find as easy. And I'm going literally through everything that people have posted, but I still might miss it. So this is what the homework is. Do a word search back to what you were looking at before of your own work. So look at your default body language, whatever it is, and then see if you can find an example of it that is basically a cliche or is simply telling, not showing. Anything that you want to communicate more. Then try rewriting with one of these 4 different methods. And this homework will be up in the file so you can review it again. Add additional body language to make the message clearer. And that they're called cluster messaging. And in real life, we are reading these cluster messaging because people very rarely just do one thing and that gives the whole message. It can be a combination. So if you have something that he frowned, okay, add additional body language that is, how deeply did they frown? You know, when you get those grooves between your eyes, or the nose is often engaged, and it can, because someone can inhale, that tightens the nose, which is like they smell something that stinks. So you add the frown with more specific description, but also add the nose. That makes it very clear that this is a stronger emotion. Write a fresh description that's specific to how your point of view character sees the nonverbal communication. So what they are seeing. And this helps you get deeper into their point of view and the reader to experience it more. Just like the example we saw from Laura Ann Gilman about Jay. We saw this and we saw what she understood about him. So why she didn't shrug, but what she did do and why she did it. Longer, but it really got the message across of both her relationship with her mentor and how she had adapted to that. The third way is more words, so the reader can see the cliche in a new way. So instead of an abrupt, she smiled, describe that smile. Was it a half moon smile? Was it a tentative hiccup of a smile? Or it looked like she wanted to swallow that smile before anybody noticed. So you can just bring it up. Use a different body area to communicate what the cliche is meant to communicate. So if you're using, your default is eyes, your default is lips, your default is whatever it is, try thinking about what you're trying to communicate and what other part of the body might communicate that. Now, here's the example. He shrugged. Rewritten, his shoulders all but rubbed his ears as he worked to find a proper response. When you're adding more words and more description, you're telling the reader, pay attention here. This matters. So as you find an example, if it's not something that really matters in your story, keep going until you find another example. Now, remember, I want you to post the original that you had and the rewrite. Okay, so you want to keep these on the short end, meaning less than a paragraph. Also, if you have a question, hashtag BL for body language Q. So body language question. So far, there's only been one, but I keep checking in case you haven't. If you did have a question and you haven't heard a response yet, double check. Are you using that body language, hashtag body language Q or not? Now, something else. Let's see, Darlene says, it's kind of amazing that we can notice all this at one time. I'm very worried for COVID babies who grew up for 2 years without being able to learn the facial expressions. I suspect they will have some difficulty with reading body language. Well, let's get honest here. If you're looking at babies in particular, when you're in a household and you're wearing the mask out in public so that you don't spread something you may have caught, or you don't inhale something you caught. So in the home, most people didn't wear masks, 24/7. So, and even 2 years, they will still get plenty of opportunity, because even if they were 1 and they were 3 when people started taking off the mask in public, then they're going to be learning that very quickly. Carol says, how many of these do you want? Well, Carol, there's roughly 500 people in the group. So I'll still be doing exercise 1 for some people who didn't get to it. And just do 1. If there's not a lot of people responding, I'll let you know that you can post a different one. But just grab 1 just to play with it, okay? Sarah says, my COVID baby is better at it than I've seen in other nieces, nephews, and foster kids. She had to really focus in to learn. And it's amazing at telling things. So as a species, we are in many ways very adaptable. If this doesn't work at what we need to know, we find a different way. Cheryl, yesterday you said homework 1. I'm sorry, that was my boo-boo. It is EX. So if I slipped up, I apologize, but it is exercise. These are exercises that you are doing. I call it homework sometimes because sometimes it feels like, here's the assignment, come back with it. So that's a homework feel. But at the top of every assignment that's in the file section at the top of the page, it will actually say assignment #EX1 or assignment #EX2 or whatever it is. So I'm not using the HW, and for a couple people who did, I hunted down their postings, but yeah, not homework 1. My bad. Christine wants to know, so the point of view character is seeing things similarly to the way poker players watch each other for their tells. Absolutely, we do it all the time, particularly when we don't know somebody, when we are hoping for a particular response from them and we're not sure what response they'll give. We have a tendency to focus in on their body language more to give us a hint. Are they going to be agreeable? Are they going to, shut you down, etc.? So the poker players is an extreme type of where, remember yesterday we talked about in real life, people have a tendency to school their features, which means train their expressions so they don't show body language. That's what poker players do. But they have to do more than that. They have to make sure that they don't breathe when they're surprised or happy, that their hands don't give them away, that they don't have a tell. Sometimes can be something a little more shorthand for they pull their ear, they rub their head, so we're looking at using something that currently is a cliche in your work, and how can you change it up to make it stronger in one of those 4 ways? Using additional body language to make the message clearer, writing a fresh description as to how the point of view character sees the message, more words, so the reader sees the cliche in a new way, or use a different area of the body to communicate with what your cliche is meant to communicate. Again, those 4 points are going to be in your exercise handout that has already been loaded to this Facebook page. And again, I was asked yesterday for 2 things. One was for a bibliography or a list of authors that tend to write very good nonverbal communication or body language. I had it uploaded, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's about 6 pages. It's broken down to general fiction, suspense, women's fiction, romantic suspense, romance, young adult, urban fantasy or futuristic, historicals, and then nonfiction. Because more and more authors are adding body language into nonfiction work. Why? Because it brings the reader deeper into the experience. So 6 pages of that. If you only see an author's name, that means everything that they write will show good nonverbal communication. If you see a specific title of a book, it means I can vouch for that, but I may not have read their other books or other titles. That is going to, so I don't want, sometimes, especially earlier in a career, some writers have taken the time and the effort and they just do outstanding nonverbal communication. And then they get rushed for time or doing all the business of writing. And so some of their later books can not have what the earlier books had. So, and the other question was a bibliography of books about body language. And I'm still looking for that. I know it's around here somewhere. I'm just don't know where it is. Darlene gives a link here about body cluster messaging. And that again is simply when more than one part of the body is making the message clear. So like a shrug. Sometimes you can figure out what the shrug means by the context of what's going on in the scene. But sometimes you want to understand that shrug more, or if it's a part of your body that you normally don't even realize it communicates, like knees or feet or ears, or that oftentimes is included with other nonverbal communication from other parts of the body. So the frown is added to the tension in the shoulder and the conscious unclenching of the hands. So that's what Darlene is saying there. Okay, any other questions here? You're doing an outstanding job. I just really appreciated those who took the time to do the exercise yesterday. And if you haven't done it yet, you can still do it as we get into tomorrow and the next day. I may not get back to all of them, but I'll give it a good shot. And other people have been very good about giving feedback too. And for some of you, I recommended that you do some people watching. If you're not, airports, any big grouping type of thing are so wonderful to see body language, because usually we can't hear the other person. So we have to rely on what we're seeing in the body. But the TV and movies, and particularly commercials used to have a whole minute to give us their message. turn the volume off and look at the commercials and see what that commercial is actually selling you as a consumer. It might be selling you relief. It might be selling you more sex more often. It might be selling you, and it has nothing to do with the product. What they're trying to do is get the message to you that if you use this product, this is the emotion that you're going to experience. This is why a lot of those commercials, and I don't know if you have it elsewhere in the world, but we have a lot of here, this is a great drug, ask your doctor about this drug. So it's selling directly to consumers. And then as they show a lot of in very small print and will tell you, you might die. You might throw up for the rest of your life. You might turn green. You might get big boils and pus. But what they show is someone walking through a bucolic space or playing with their dog or laughing and smiling. That's what they're saying you're going to get if this drug does what they're promising you, so that you don't notice all those other things that are much more likely that you will experience in some degree with it. So thank you, Sandy. I adore Sandy because she's in Australia. She came to western coast of Washington, just below the Canadian border, to 2 different live plotting events. This is a person who's committed to the craft of writing. And this, she keeps, in spite of anything that's going on, she makes a point of continuing to learn. And that's what, particularly when we start out writing, oftentimes we can go into a library or a bookstore and think, oh boy, anybody and their brother can write. We don't see what that author had to go through to learn that craft. And this body language is one of those craft skills that they don't teach us very often. And so, is it any wonder that it's missing from our work? Once you can see how powerful it is, you will never take it for granted again. And you'll also spend an inordinate amount of your time checking out the other people around you in a restaurant. And it's funny because, and this is something that one of those differences between men and women. Men often will go into a restaurant or something, and 15 minutes later, they can tell you about how many tables there are, what kind of, what table is near where the waiters and the waitress goes in that door, or what table could actually give you a good access if there's a fire. Whereas the wife will go in and be able to tell you who are the couples, who are, there's tension between them, which family is a really strong family versus the family that is looking in all different directions, has nothing to say to each other, and all their body language is waiting. When am I going to get the food so I can get out of here? So we have a classroom available to us. And the more we study in that classroom, the more when we get to our work, we can start adding not only different body language because we saw it in real life, but also write fresh body language. So, any other questions before we sign out here? Tech, I already put the homework, the assignment, I'm sorry, I used the homework word, the exercise up in the files section of the homepage, the Facebook group. So you'll see that there. And the replay, you can go over the replay because there's a couple of authors in the replay that I didn't include in the list that I pulled up. It's a beginning list. It is not a final list of bibliography of other writers who do a great job. I also recommend, as you're reading, maybe not in the middle of the night when you're rushing through a book, write examples from other authors that you think, wow, I flag them and then come back to them to see, how did this author do that? And you do that enough and you're going to have your own Bible of examples to use that can help prime the pump when you're in the revision process, or even the more you use body language, the more you will be including it in your first drafts. So thank you for being here. I'm going to sign out now and start giving feedback to the homework. So look forward to seeing those who can be here tomorrow and with a new exercise tomorrow. So take care. You're doing great. Keep moving forward.